I recently actually just had a title change. I'm now the service editor. And that means that I handle our service journalism. And if you're unfamiliar with what that is back in the newspaper days, it would be the things that you would kind of cut and clip and maybe put on your refrigerator. That really good, I know I'm going to use this later kind of stuff. So my job is to figure out how we can take what's going on in the industry, what's going on in the news, and make it serviceable for the reader to use that information in their business.
You're listening to the Real Estate Sessions podcast, and I'm your host, Bill Risser, Executive Vice President, Strategic Partnerships with Rate My Agent, a digital marketing platform designed to help great agents harness the power of verified reviews. For more information, head on over to ratemyagent.com. Listen in as I interview industry leaders and get their stories and journeys to the world of real estate. Hi, everybody. Welcome to episode 363 of the Real Estate Sessions podcast. Yes, we're in year 9. Thank you so much for tuning in. Thank you so much for telling a friend. I have a fantastic guest lined up today. We are going to be talking to the contributor wrangler, the columnist that handles the Real Tea column and part of the Inman team. I'm going to be talking to Dani Vanderboegh. And for those of you who have been in the Inman world, maybe as an ambassador like I am, you've met Dani. She's an amazing woman, and we're going to have a lot of fun with this. So let's get it started. Dani, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me.
We go way back. You've been with Inman for 8 going on 9 years. Does that sound about right?
That's exactly right.
Yeah, and I've been an ambassador at Inman. At that time, I was one of the gang that was kind of that core group that got through the teens, I guess we'll say, because there's definitely a different shift in the plan, which there should be. There always should be some shifting in that group of people. So I would run into you at events and things, and so that's very cool. But This is going to be a lot of fun because I've never really, I've interviewed some people at Inman. I've interviewed Brad. I've interviewed Craig, which was super fun. I had no idea his background, and I love getting the background of people, right? So that's what we're here for. First of all, I think you live in the St. Louis area now, and I think you're a native Missourian. Am I on track there?
You're close. I moved here when I was 3.
Okay. That's close enough. I think that's...
Yeah.
If you say,
I don't remember much else, let's say.
Yeah, that's true. And so my first question is this. What do we need to know about Missouri that we don't? And what should we forget about Missouri that we believe?
That's a tricky one.
You can go anywhere you want.
I would say that our super loud politicians don't necessarily echo the sentiments of the entire state.
Okay.
And I would say there are a lot of gems past the Arch and Busch Stadium, though those are amazing, in St. Louis that are worth seeing. And there's like kind of a push for urban revitalization where they're using a lot of buildings that were raised at the beginning of the century and of last century. And they're having a good time kind of coming up with these great urban revitalization projects, such as the Armory, where they've put in this great like food court, and all these food trucks now have like sorry, that's the Foundry. But they have a home now. So they're, and they use the original like machinery and different pieces throughout to kind of harken back to the previous. That's the kind of stuff I love about St. Louis.
Yeah.
The City Museum is my favorite place in the city.
That's great. Yeah. And tell me, so St. Louis, I'm going to butcher this probably pretty badly. St. Louis is on the eastern side of the state?
Correct.
And Kansas City is close by. It's up the 80 or up some freeway. It's not far away.
It's about 4 hours west.
Okay. Oh,
so
I
like
see.
The full other side of the state.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So, and there's like, there should be this little rivalry between I'm just going to throw this out there, the Cardinals and the Royals, but something tells me it's more the Cardinals and the Cubs. And as you shake your head.
It's very much the Cardinals and the Cubs. The Cubs are like, it's funny. They're like the all-time enemy, but like at the end of the day, I think most Cardinals fans would rather see the Cubs go all the way than like the Yankees go all the way.
Yeah, as I sit here with the Tampa Bay Rays hat on, and just came out of a Yankee series where the last place lowly Yankees tried to draw the Rays into a little bean brawl incident, but the Rays said it's not worth it, not worth it for us. They're in last place. We don't care, and that's a great feeling, right, for all fans,
Mm,
except
yeah.
if you're a Yankee fan.
Yeah.
So
We take sportsmanship seriously here at Busch Stadium.
yeah, tell me about even as a child growing up, you were a Cards fan. I mean, there were some really good years going through Joaquin Andahar. I'm throwing some names out there that I know from a while ago that hopefully you're old enough to remember. I don't know.
So as a kid, it was like a huge ordeal to go down and see Ozzie Smith. And like even before I was aware of like what baseball really is, you'd go down and watch just to see if he'd do backflips, you know,
Yeah.
like that was the good old days.
Yeah, Ozzie. I watched Ozzie in San Diego where I grew up. So we lost Ozzie
Mm.
to the Cardinals, and we got Gary
Aw.
Templeton, who was nice. He just liked to flip people off a little too much, and I don't think Ozzie ever did that. So
Ozzie would never do that.
all right. So we'll move off of that. I like to find out from people, especially because I generally talk to realtors, right? People in the business who almost all of them had a first career, and real estate is a second, sometimes third, right? But I'm just gonna guess for you, as say you in your high school, were you thinking journalism? Was that on your radar right at that time, or what were you thinking about?
So it's funny because it should have been because like okay, so as a kid I would like write book reports on like the encyclopedia and like I grew up very much reading a lot and like in middle school I did the paper and then in high school I had this teacher he'd make me read out loud and I was not confident in reading out loud and he would make me read Shakespeare out loud.
Oh,
And this guy was the head of the newspaper and like the entire journalism section at our school, newspaper, yearbook, all of it. So I did not go into that. But at the time, I thought that I wanted to be like an Indiana Jones, like the female Indiana Jones. I wanted
okay.
to go into archaeology and anthropology. Then after I had my accident, it just wasn't. It wasn't going to be the way I wanted it to be, so I wanted to find something else. And then
Yeah.
that's when I turned to writing and figured journalism would be the next path.
I'd like to talk about the accident if you're okay with that.
Yeah.
Okay.
No, I'm so open about it. Don't worry.
I think there's an opportunity here for me and for a lot of people listening to understand how to approach people, how to talk about things, right? So
Yeah.
for those who don't know, you're a paraplegic, you're in a wheelchair.
Mhm.
And I think you were a teenager when this happened. So let's talk about that process a little bit, where you want to go with that. I'm open for it.
Sure. So my big goal when I was a kid, growing up was to go away to school. And I got into a school that had archaeology as a minor and
Mhm.
anthropology as a major. And like I said, that was kind of a driving factor of what I was, it was like affordability and like where can I study what I actually want to study.
Right.
And so I went to this school in Cape Girardeau, Missouri called Southeast Missouri State. And there's this hill, it's called Cardiac Hill. And years later, I worked with a lady at Macy's. That was my first career. I worked with her and she was in her 60s and she had gone to school there. And she told me that when she went to school there, everybody went sledding down Cardiac Hill. So it's like this long standing tradition. So we had this really great snow. It was like 12 inches of snow, then some melting, and then more snow on top of it. It was like irresistible if you're a snow person, right? It's almost the end of first semester. And we've been gathering friends for like hours to go sledding. And we finally get out there and there's a baby pool, like you put your 2-year-old in this little plastic baby pool, right?
Yeah, right.
So being the smart, 19, 20 somethings that we thought it would be a great idea for us all to go down together. And the hill is so steep and the snow is so deep that the boys had to like pull it up, like it took several boys to pull this pole up to the top of the hill. And by the top, I mean like maybe halfway because they pulled it to the closest tree, braced it up against the tree, let some boys get in, let the girls get in, and then the rest of the boys got in. All in all, there was maybe 10 of us.
Wow.
And on our way down, so either we hit a bump or somebody bailed and we turned trajectory. And so now we were facing backward. And when we got to the bottom, we hit like a light post. And so everybody just kind of dogpiled like right on top of me. And fortunately, nobody else was hurt. And I kind of knew immediately, like, I knew something wasn't right. I said, just leave me here and call 911. And that's what we did. And I went to the hospital there. Unfortunately, they didn't have, the right facilities for spinal cord injury, which is what I had. For
Hmm.
those of you who know what that is, it's at the T12L1 level. So it's pretty low and it's incomplete, which means I do have some movement, some feeling below the waist. And so they couldn't air vac me up to St. Louis. So we ended up like taking an ambulance up. And then I had like a long surgery, and then they switched me over to a rehab facility. And then I went back and had another surgery and then rehab facility until February. That was December 5th. February 13th is when I got out of the hospital.
And at that point, you're at a place where there's not going to be any improvement, or is there always a chance? How does that? How were you feeling at that point?
It's at that point, I was fully hopeful that I would be, up and
Okay.
walking
Hmm.
immediately.
And then, my question to you is this: you probably have people come up to you and ask you, why are you in a wheelchair? Is what is the proper way to ask that question, or is there no proper way?
So I think like, okay. So I think like it depends on kind of your rapport with that person, right?
Mm.
Like, I think if you just walk up to a stranger,
Yeah.
that's kind of uncomfortable. You wouldn't just walk up to a stranger and ask them about, like a deformity or a birthmark or whatever. Like, use
Right.
your judgment.
Right.
However, there are many in my belief system who, we believe in talking about it because that's what creates awareness. And if we have awareness, that's how we move forward, right? So, like for me, I'm happy to talk about it. And a stranger could walk up and ask me, and I would give them the full story. But other people maybe are more sensitive. And there's a grieving process that goes along with the whole thing. Like, you're grieving who you were, and it takes, like, I don't even think I realized it as I was going through it, but like it takes time. And if you catch somebody who's maybe a little in their grieving, they may not respond in the same way.
Right. What would you wish people knew about your life in a wheelchair? What should we understand? Does that make sense?
Yeah,
Okay.
I think that there's this misconception that like, oh, you're in a wheelchair now, you can't do any of the things that you did before, and like your life is virtually over. And like, that happened when I was 19, and since then, I've had a career, stopped that career, got my master's degree, started a new career. I'm scuba dive certified. I've done a half marathon. I've had a baby. Like that, there's very little that I feel like I haven't accomplished. It
Right.
just doesn't look the same way as it did when I was 19.
Right. Yeah, that's great. That's great to hear. I love that. You mentioned the second career. Let's start there because this is really exciting. You got your master's at the Missouri School of Journalism, which doing a little research, I knew it was important because I always think of Northwestern for like certain things, and I think of Syracuse for other things, and Missouri's the other one, right? Like there's these three schools that feel like they're, whether it's on air or writing and that sort of thing. But I found a couple places that said it's arguable that the Missouri School of Journalism is the best school of journalism, not only in the country, but in the world. That's pretty cool. Is that so? So let's talk about first of all, that experience, and obviously, it's to me, it's obvious why you chose it. It's the best.
Well, the location didn't hurt, as
True.
it's about 90 minutes from where I currently live.
Okay.
But fortunately, maybe part of the career path was determined by the fact that one of the best journalism schools in the country, and arguably in the world, is in my backyard. So backing up. So when I had my accident, I was like working weekends at Olive Garden. And long story short, I got fired for opening the door after close, even though I had asked for managerial permission to open the door. It pretty much felt like they didn't want me there, and I was okay not being there if I was not wanted.
Sure.
So I went across the street and applied over at Macy's and got hired almost immediately. And I sold housewares, and I was working through, my undergrad degree. I had a slew of health problems throughout my undergrad degree that were
Mhm.
just, like random and made it harder. I graduated in 4 years, which at the time, that was a big goal for me because, like I said, college was my first goal.
Mhm.
But then when I graduated in 2006. And as you know, like housing hit bottom in 2008. So like there weren't a ton of jobs. I knew I wasn't getting a job in communications.
Right.
So I went to Macy's and I got a job there, and it was good enough money that I could, like use my disability money at the time to pay for my education and live on my own. Because I went back to my parents' house for about 6 months, and they live in a 2-story, and we just realized it wasn't going to work long term pretty quick. So I had to get an apartment. I got an apartment with a couple of girlfriends and kind of like learned to live on my own in that way with a
Awesome.
safety net, right?
Mhm. Yep.
And then I lived with a boyfriend for a couple months, and then I realized I didn't enjoy living on someone else's lease, and I went and got my own lease. So now I'm living by myself. But I'm still like 15 minutes away from my parents, and I have a fabulous support system, but they're like maybe a little too supportive sometimes.
Sure.
So they would just take care of things. And it's like I knew I wasn't really fully taking care of everything that I would need to if I was going to move away, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I started this mentally, I called it Project Cut the Cord. And I just decided I was going to, start working further. I switched my job down to the Galleria. So it was like 30 minutes into the city. And then I moved 30 minutes away from my parents. And then I started, like studying and applying. Like I had to take the GRE. So I took a 2-week vacation. At this point, I was managing the Lancome counter. I had worked in prescriptives, which is no longer in existence, as the counter manager. It went under. And then I went to Estee Lauder, and I was not the counter manager there. I was just a sales associate. Estee Lauder I love, but it wasn't really like my makeup vibe. So when Lancome came along and said, "Do you want a counter manager position?" I was like, yes. So I moved over there, and makeup was really fun because there's a lot of equivalents that are like similar experiences in selling in the department store that kind of work in my understanding of what real estate, how real estate, like for instance, when you have to cold call to get business for like your gift with purchase. So it's a lot of cold calling. You have to walk up to people in the store that you don't know.
Yep.
This is sort of like door knocking and get them to come back to the counter with you. It's those kind of things which were helpful. But so I took 2 weeks vacation. I studied on Khan Academy math because I hadn't taken math since high school for those 2 weeks. And then I took the GRE and wrote an essay about essentially everything that had happened to me from when I had my accident and to why I wanted to go into journalism. And a big part of that was there was no upward mobility in the job I was in. There was nowhere to go. And it wasn't what I wanted to be doing when I was, 45 or 50. I wanted to do something that to me would be fulfilling, would change day to day, that would have travel opportunities. And I wanted to get my master's in journalism. So I applied, by the grace of God, they took me. And I mean, at this point I had no practical, like I'd never worked in an office. I didn't even really have a professional email. I didn't have any kind of technical skill whatsoever. Like iPhones were just, I don't think I even had one yet. They were just becoming affordable, So in 2012 is when I went to J school. And the reason that I personally would argue that it's the best school in the world is I had, your master's program is 2 years and I knew nothing going in. And by the end, I wouldn't say I was like a great journalist or anything, but I had the foundation to build on the skills that I needed to become, someone who could do this as a profession. And luckily I landed at Inman, and they've been so nurturing.
That's awesome. As you come out, a proud tiger, I'm hoping. Yeah. Okay, good. Was Inman the first thing you did, or, was real estate on your radar, I guess is the question.
So no, actually, so you're supposed to, like I said, you're supposed to have 2 years for your master's, but I wanted to stay a little bit longer because I knew I really didn't know everything and I had more to learn. So I stayed over the summer after I was supposed to graduate. And then I took the next semester to defend my professional project, which is like a mini thesis with a professional component. And so to fill that time between when I was supposed to graduate and when my next job, I made sure to get an internship. So I worked at this alt weekly in Greensboro, North Carolina. Wow. And it was fun. It was like, editing, like basic editing and like writing about food and theater and so like it was fun. But it was mostly to fill the resume because I didn't have a whole lot. And so I had been interviewing for jobs there. I don't have any family there. I was just wanted to live somewhere else and see how it went. And this gentleman, Britt Chester, had taken over as editor-in-chief shortly after I arrived. And he had worked with Amber Toffin, who you'll probably remember from way back. And she was the editor-in-chief at Inman at the time.
Mm-hmm.
And I swear, we were walking out of work one night and he looked like a bolt of lightning hit him in the head. And he was like, I know someone who's looking for a journalist. You could be that journalist. And yeah, she hired me. I talked to Brad a couple days later. And that's when I started with 50 contributors. And the rest is history.
Yeah, and I know Britt as well, because he helped out with some really cool software to make the Inman Connect experience like real time right now. It was super cool. We felt like we were all photojournalists if you did it right. And he'd be super happy if you sent him some good B-roll. So shout out to Britt. That's great.
Britt, for all you do.
Yeah. So first of all, just a quick question. Brad's an interesting guy. Do you have a story you want to share about Brad that you can share?
Yeah, actually. And I'm going to try really hard not to cry.
Oh.
So when I had my daughter, she was premature. She came at 26 weeks and 4 days. So it was just over 6 months. And I did not have a ton of vacation time saved up. And they allowed my coworkers to donate time so that I wouldn't be working a whole lot of time. And he donated something like 180 hours so that I would get paid while I was taking care of my daughter in the NICU.
That sounds like Brad. That's awesome. You mentioned contributor wrangler.
I did.
Contributor wrangler. I love that phrase. And I know that I was part of that for a while. But for the life of me, I can't remember what I wrote about, but I'm sure you had to do some heavy editing on it. So I'll apologize right now for that. But talk about that role. And I've got to assume that herding cats is definitely something you've said before. I'm just guessing.
Yes, but usually not in relation to this.
Okay. Okay.
But it does somewhat feel like that, or it has felt like that in the past. So like I said, when Amber handed over the program to me, I had about 50 contributors. And at the time, the goal, and I will say, I'll preface this by saying it's evolved in a big way.
Okay.
But the goal was to have, 5 contributed posts a day. And I knew nothing about real estate. I had a general idea, but I didn't really know anything, because you don't know what you don't know, right?
Right.
So I was just going in, doing my best to get these posts up. And then over time, I recently actually just had a title change. I'm now the service editor. And that means that I handle our service journalism. And if you're unfamiliar with what that is back in the newspaper days, it would be the things that you would kind of cut and clip and maybe put on your refrigerator. That really good, I know I'm going to use this later kind of stuff.
Right.
So my job is to figure out how we can take what's going on in the industry, what's going on in the news, and make it serviceable for the reader to use that information in their business. And part of that is tapping into our boots on the ground contributor network, which has grown to something like 1,500 contributors in my tenure.
Wow.
It's a big number now. They're not all like 100% active, but we have, that's what we've had over the years. And there's about 50 to 60 who write at least on a monthly basis.
Okay. Yeah, like Rachel Height's one I know, right? Is she a contributor, or she's moved up the ladder a little bit, it looks like? Is that true?
She's kind of a contributing editor at this point.
That's awesome. And then I see Sue Benson doing some stuff. That's pretty cool. Focusing hard on
Instagram. Contributor.
Yeah. So there's all these people that I have relationships with, and who I've had them both on the podcast. So it's super cool to see their name, on my Inman News emails, which is cool. Twice a year, Inman Connect rolls around. I'm sure there's some joy involved with that, and there's also some, oh, here we go again. I mean, got to be honest, it's got to be a ton of work. I would love to hear what that typical day at an Inman Connect event looks like. There's got to be deadlines looming because there's content going out the next day.
So I will start by saying that, like 8 years ago or even 5 years ago, it looked very different than how it looks now. A big part of my job is recruiting new contributors. So I spend a lot of my time now trying to have FaceTime with people, meet new people, have FaceTime with the people that I already work with, see as much on stage content as I can so that we can translate, what the conversation is to our pages. I actually spoke at this last Connect, both on the Woman Upstage, and I hosted the great door knocking debate with Rachel Haidt and Ernesto Vargas.
Yeah, that was great.
It was yeah, they were both really great.
Yeah.
Both contributed, like both are contributors, so they had both contributed a bunch of pieces on the topic prior, and that's how that panel came to be.
Nice. That's nice. So what's that timing look like though, as far as, someone like Craig, who's writing madly, right?
Reporter.
Yeah. How's that go? Is it yours is a little easier than his, it sounds like, if you had
So yeah, I may cover one or two sessions, but our reporters, with the guidance of our editor-in-chief, Jotham Setterstrom, he makes up this massive document that has all of the things you would ever want to know, and like really tries to make it easy on the journalists who are running around frantically. And basically the expectation is, you watch your panel, and as soon as you could file, you file. And then at home, like we'll use Vegas as this example. I was the only editor who went, and the rest of the editors were at home.
Okay.
So they stayed home making sure that everything got edited and put up, and that our newsletters were being written, and everything that was timely was getting out. Because another part of what the service team, part of what I wrangle, is that we run the Agent Edge newsletter, the Broker Edge newsletter, the Teams newsletter, the Basics, which is our new agent newsletter, and then we also staff AM, PM, and the Weekenders.
Wow.
There are still newsletters outside of that I don't wrangle.
Yeah, but there's no excuse for missing an article at Inman. There's none, because it's going to show up on the weekend, or it's going to show up on one of the other, kind of.
Yeah. We try to get it out there.
Summary newsletter. So that's great. There's some news happening right now in the world of real estate. We just happen to be recording this. I'll say the date on August 28th, 9th, 8th, 9th, August 29th. And yesterday, Kenny Parcell resigned from NAR, and the New York Times released an article last Saturday that was damning of NAR leadership, and it's really created a lot of commentary, a lot of action. Sue Yenicon comes right to mind with what she did over the weekend with Bob and leadership. Anything, I know you're a journalist, so I think we'll stick there, but your thoughts on this, and where we're, is there what's next? That's really tough.
Well, so I'll kind of talk through kind of how we've been covering it, if that works for you. Mm-hmm. So as we had discussed this previously, but so I've been on the circuit of going to women's conferences the past few years. So I've been attending and speaking at Women Up and Awesome Females, and just kind of really focusing on listening to the voices within that group. And they've, been speaking about the different systemic issues that have been happening. And within that network of women, we had heard that this story was coming before it came, right? Okay. So on June 27th, Brevard filed a suit against NAR for racial and sexual discrimination. And she withdrew the suit 9 days later. So that happened right before, the Awesome Females conference happened. And so we spent in those conferences, we were spending a lot of time discussing, what the state of the industry looks like. And we had gotten word that the New York Times was going to be doing an expose. We had some idea what was going to be in it. And on our end, we were ready to, put forth what our reporting has been. Now, yesterday I was covering the entire org because our EIC was out for appointments. And it was interesting because Saturday we all came, our group came in. We thought that the New York Times article was going to drop on Saturday, but we weren't 100% sure. So we had went ahead with, plan A of newslettering. And then we came in on Saturday, published our story, and then made that our A on Monday. And then on Monday, we were expecting, outcry and reaction. And so we had reporters covering all of it, from the reaction to, what the system that puts these leaders into office, what those processes look like. There will be a lot more coming, but so far we have reaction and a lot of op-eds.
Yeah.
And what happens next is unsure, but Kenny Parcell did resign yesterday about 3:11, I believe it was, Central Time. Actually, the Times ended up quoting our reporter. So that was pretty exciting. And it was after outcry from leaders like Sue Yanicom, who publicly, and she was one of the few who publicly said,
Right.
this is not okay. And I'm calling Bob Goldberg, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah. Look, I think real estate's local. It always has been, always will be. It's local, right? And I think that the thing that I've seen over the last few days is just how important the local associations are to an agent. It really matters about the MLS that they belong to, and that the association that more than likely owns the MLS, or their state level association. And NAR seems to be this thing just sitting out there with a lot of money from a lot, because it's the largest trade association, right, in the country. So they have
Yes.
they have lots of revenue and lots of opportunities to do great things. And maybe those opportunities aren't being met. So it's going to be interesting to see where this all plays out. But it was, for me, shocking, yet at the same time, you're like, oh man, maybe we should have seen something along these lines coming. Does that make sense?
Yeah, what's interesting though is so since the first lawsuit had dropped in June, I did some reaction after that story. I helped with the reaction on that story because I'm plugged into that women's network. And unfortunately, most people I called weren't surprised by it. It was mostly women. And the flip side of that is that there's so many people who just can't, they feel they can't talk about it. There's contracts with NAR, there's contracts with other associations. There's, when you look at cases like this outside of real estate, there's often a hefty sum paid out, and there's usually non-disclosures involved. And, there's a bajillion reasons that women aren't able to speak about these abuses. And I will say that it's nice to see that the New York Times was able to get, I think it was 29 women on the record.
Right.
That's not an easy feat in itself. But a paper like the Times that has that legal arm and is credible in that way nationwide to the consumer and everyone, this isn't a story that's going away anytime soon.
Yeah, we'll have to pay attention and see where it goes. Well, let's talk about something more fun. How about that? How about
Let's do it.
How about this? I'm going to assume that you really, really like the project called Real Tea. By the way, name is fantastic. Name is fantastic.
Thank
Real
you.
Tea.
Thank you.
I'm not going to spoil the surprise. For those that don't know, explain what Real Tea is.
It's where real estate and reality TV intersect on Inman.
Nice.
In Vegas, we were just sitting around the table, and our Lockhart Steele, our content director, was like, "Who likes reality TV?" And I was like, "This guy, I like reality." And he was like, "You should be writing a column." And the first column I wrote was about Jason Oppenheim, and he was discussing Compass, and he was being critical of Compass, we'll say.
Okay.
And yeah, it's been a really fun column. In fact, today we were on a virtual press junket for the next season of Selling the OC, which will drop here soon. There will be a new Realty column coming in the next week or so.
Is it relatively easy to get access because of you got a ton of readers, so I'm sure that for the PR people for these shows, they're like, yeah, absolutely. Let's get an interview or something.
I think there's a little bit of pull there because real estate doesn't typically love reality TV. Like there's kind of no, I'm not unaware of the fact that reality TV does not necessarily portray real estate in the most accurate way. But what excites me about it is you do see people using this TV mechanism to build their business. And you'll see on Real Housewives, for instance, you'll see women come in with absolutely no brand, no business, and then they build up these like massive businesses just using their TV personalities.
Right.
So the intersection of that into real estate just felt like a really fun thing to be able to, to talk about and also to have a little fun with outside of the tougher stories that we cover.
Yeah, I was going to say, it probably seems like, I don't want to say it's less work, but it feels, it's
Not
got
at
to be fun.
all.
Yeah.
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 It's actually, in some ways, it's more work because everything is so public. You really have to be kind of on it,
Yeah. Yeah. You got
But
to,
I like that assignment, so it's okay.
yeah, you got to know your stuff. I love that.
Yeah.
Dani, this has been awesome. Let me finish with the same question I've asked every guest. Now, you're not a realtor, but I know you have an answer for this question because all of us do. What one piece of advice would you give a new agent just starting in the business?
Create content. And by content, I don't mean vanity content. I mean content that will help your clients through the process, that will help them know who you are and what you do to help them. And then the second part of that is push it out to the world. Like, make sure you're on the socials, pushing out your content, showing the value you offer, and really just double down on doing those things. Make video, make articles, push it out there, get your face out there, be the realtor they know.
Yeah, that's awesome. Dani, if someone wants to reach out to you, maybe they want to apply to be a contributor. What's the best way for them to do that?
If you want to be a contributor, please reach out to me at Dani@Inman.com, and I can send you all of the information you'll need.
Awesome. That's great. Dani, this has been great. Thank you so much for your time today. And I'm going to pay a lot of attention to realty. I promise you. I can't wait. So, all right. Deal?
I'm so excited. Thank you so much for having me. It's been an honor to be included on this long-running podcast that I've listened to so many times.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you for listening to the Real Estate Sessions. Please head over to ratethispodcast.com/RE sessions to leave a review or a rating, and subscribe to the Real Estate Sessions podcast at your favorite podcast listening app.